Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is BlueMaxima. Let's just get right into it. Number 100. Usually I wouldn't put Daisen Ryaku Exceed 2 in this slot, and I didn't. In my original Top 100 Vita games video, it was not there at all, despite the fact that it had been out and checked out at that point. But there's something about this game that appeals to me, and I wish I had more time to play it, mainly because there's nothing else like it on Vita. It's known for being somewhat buggy in Japan, like the entire series, not just this game, but this game apparently does have its own problems. And it is intensely complex. Like, the amount of stats and individual things that every individual unit has is ridiculous. And not to mention things like the absolutely terrible background music. That is just weird. But the massive amount of factions, the amount of units, the amount of maps, the amount of missions that you have to do, being able to carry units back and forth across those missions in order to level them up and see if you can actually maintain a decent standing army. And things like its massive scale with thousands of individual hexes, its glacial pace of being able to control every individual unit, even with like the AI auto-pathing feature they've got in there, it's still slow as shit. And the general sense of warfare that the game has, like, you know, planes flying over the top, jeeps going around the side, actually constructing full-on supply lines, capturing all sorts of buildings and building new units to be constantly supplying your front line. Even in games like Advance Wars that try to do this sort of strategy game, it doesn't really create that sense of real-world warfare that something like Daisen Ryaku does, no matter how unpolished or buggy or simply terrible it may be sometimes. But yeah, there is absolutely nothing else like this game pretty much in the world, not just on Vita, which is why I felt bad about leaving it off the list the first time, and which is why it gets to sit at spot number 100. I picked this one over the World War II one, Daisen Ryaku Perfect, and I can't remember what the fourth one was. Oh, Gendai Daisen Ryaku, which is the modern one where you control like a private military company, because out of the four, it's the easiest to get into, the most polished, and it's also got some neat stuff going on, like the 3D world map and the just general presentation of it just goes above and beyond the rest. So there you go. Number 99.
Enough! If you want to worry, do it back at the Atelier.
But the knighthood exists to be the king's shield.
Aren't there people who need your help?
I'm pleased you like it. Feel free to wear it as long as you like.
All right, got it. I'm looking forward to getting lots more from you too.
So the footage I'm going to be using is of Atelier Rorona Plus, because that would be the one that I would recommend to anyone trying to get into the series due to its relatively higher difficulty than the rest of the series and having the whole timer thing going on, but it's also the first game of the first trilogy, so it makes sense story-wise. But then again, there's like 8 of these games on Vita, and most of them are basically identical. I mean, there are some mechanics changed here and there, and there are some things gone that aren't in the other games and stuff like that, but the entire series just maintains this similar sort of overtone all the way through. That kind of reminds me of the Yakuza games where they recycle a lot, but thankfully what they recycle usually works, so I don't mind so much. The series is about cute girls doing cute things, and the cute things are crafting things. You go out, you collect materials, you bring them back, and you craft them in the pot to make useful items. Rinse and repeat. But the entire series, as far as I've played anyway, again, I have very little time for these things these days, unfortunately, but they always have this nice, like, tone to them. They're really friendly, they're really bright, they're really relaxing in that sense, and you know this is true by the fact that you can go up to barrels, and every single character loves their barrels. That's just a thing that they do. And there's always a ton to do in these games, tons of side quests, tons of items to make, tons of just things like that to do that give the game a lot of personality. And I appreciate that quite a bit. And of course there are 8 of them, so if you ever want more crafting, if you ever want more enemy battles, you ever want more like that, well, there you go. It's very easy to recommend the Atelier. What would you call them? Would you call them trilogies? Because I guess you would call them trilogies. I don't think the third trilogy's third game came out on Vita, which is unfortunate, at least not in here in the West, but there you go. I've got written down here in the list as a tautology, which is not correct, but that's just what I've called it. But yeah, if you're looking for cute girls doing cute things, some fun crafting items and gathering to craft those items, some decent battles, and just a really nice overall tone that's more relaxing than it is like frustrating or depressing like a lot of other games, well, go for this one. You won't be disappointed. And as I said before, start with Atelier Rorona Plus if you want a place to start with. Number 98. Singing games with fictional people. How bizarre is that? But while it exists, it's actually pretty good. So the Vocaloids in this game are fictional people. They are technology. And people have been taking that technology and using them to make their own songs, and these 3 games are basically just collections of those songs with a bunch of dress-up stuff to do, which is a really interesting concept, and it actually turned out alright. Changed my mind on the idea of the whole Vocaloid thing being a bit silly, because these are some really well-produced songs, and they have these really cool music videos going in the background with the good dancing, and it looks nice. It looks really nice, not to mention some of the games actually have the ability to make your own, which is a really cool idea. The gameplay is pretty basic, it's just pressing the buttons in time, and I'm kind of annoyed by how they swarm in from outside the screen, but other than that, it actually works pretty well. Dress-up fans will absolutely love these games though, because they have tons of unlockable bits of costumes and stuff like that for you to put onto the characters and take them through pretty much any of the things, because they're not like pre-generated music videos, they're in real time, so they look pretty damn good in retrospect, and again, since you can dress them up as much as you like, it's actually a lot of fun that way. At least for people who enjoy that stuff. I'm not particularly into it, but it was kind of neat being able to go in and put ridiculous costumes on them. Hatsune Miku X is probably the best place to start because the gameplay is most up to date there, but F and F Second do have more songs than X, so, I mean, there you go. I also want to bring along an honorable mention in the form of Miracle Girls Festival, which is made on the same engine, but actually has like real-world anime songs with the characters from those anime instead of the Vocaloids, and I actually really liked that one because there were a couple of series in there that I was very familiar with, and it was fun to watch that as well. So if you like that gameplay and you're a fan of anime, well, you should probably have a look at picking that one up as well. Number 97. Yeah, we're not going to be doing series from this point on in the list, except I think there's like one duology in this video, but other than that, we're stopping with the series, honestly. So the game being shown is the first Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth title, but there are tons of others. There is the strategy spin-off, there is 2 and 3, there is the bloody Hyperdimension Neptunia Producing Perfection Idol game, which is actually like the worst game, don't even bother with that one. And there's like the 2 beat-em-up ones as well. Like there are so many Neptunia games on Vita, but as much as those games are decent, the best thing to do is to recommend the original trilogy and then probably the strategy spin-off because it was done by Sting. But for those of you who don't know, Hyperdimension Neptunia is basically a tongue-in-cheek RPG made with personified recreations of the game consoles, and it's basically just a entire, like, piss take of the console war. It's cute, it's adorable, it's kind of hilarious sometimes with some of the ridiculous references they come up with, and the RPGs themselves are also alright, although it's definitely not a series you want to be playing back to back. Generally, they go ridiculously cheap as well, so if you're looking for something that's just a fun parody of the industry as it is today, and some decent RPG gameplay to go with it, the Rebirth trilogy usually goes on sale for ridiculously cheap, so pick up the first one, it's fun. Number 96. So Lone Survivor is a little bit weird in the Vita pantheon of horror games because it was more or less the first two-dimensional horror game to come out on the thing. We got a fair few afterwards. The only ones that were particularly different from this one were Yomawari, and those were also the only other ones actually worth playing, so there you go. Lone Survivor is a two-dimensional horror game inspired by the likes of Silent Hill, and I think it does its own thing, but it does it really well. The horror is convincing. It isn't the sort of, like, really in-your-face sort of thing going on. It's also got a really dreadful atmosphere that makes you really careful about what you try and do. The monsters are kind of terrifying, and you really do want to hide from them instead of just standing and fighting like the later Resident Evil games did. The story is just creepy. It's got multiple endings to make you want to go back through. And just the overall presentation of the thing is fantastic. It is a wonderful looking game, a wonderful sounding game, and it just does everything that a two-dimensional horror game needs to do right, and it did it better than pretty much every other 2D horror game that came out on the Vita did. It is easy to recommend if you want to get a little bit distraught over just a terrifying atmosphere. Number 95. Axiom Verge is a metroidvania with some really interesting concepts behind it. The basic main thing that it's got going for it is that while its presentation and just overall gameplay are both really good, the one thing that it has really going for it is its unique tendency to glitch things out. There is this great way that it plays with you by using things. You get a ton of items, a ton of weapons, and a ton of things like that, and they're all great as well. But the one thing that makes Axiom Verge stand out is the idea that you have a ton of individual gadgets to play with that can actually glitch out the environment and glitch out enemies and glitch out yourself. Like the teleporter that you get that lets you go through walls is just a glitch in and of itself, and it plays with this theme over and over again, not to mention the story is bloody bonkers as well. So if you're looking for a really good Metroidvania with a great twist on everything in the form of the glitches, this is your first place to look. Number 94. Yep, it's another Metroidvania, because of course it is, but Iconoclasts is the same as Axiom Verge. All the stuff that it does with basic Metroidvanias is well polished and well produced. And it's got the nice unique gimmick of everything basically being mechanical. Like, you are a mechanic. You go through and you do mechanical things to other mechanical things in order to progress, and that is absolutely fine. It does a really good job at it. The theme is really upbeat. I enjoy it quite a lot. And again, if you're looking for a unique Metroidvania, thanks to a little bit of a twist here and there, not to mention the fact that it's well produced, well, you can't go wrong with this one either. Number 93. I feel the same way about Joe Danger in the same way that I do about Tony Hawk. Now, for those of you who haven't played Tony Hawk, which is like probably none of you considering, but for those of you who haven't played Tony Hawk, the fun that you would get from that game is basically a form of self-expression, where you get to travel the levels in any way you want, you get to do tricks in any sort of way that you want, and your only basic goal is to like go for high scores or to explore the world. Joe Danger, while being on more of a linear sort of track than Tony Hawk, contains the same sort of passion in spades, where you can do tricks all you want, you can explore the level all you want, and you can just express yourself through the game. You can do things how you like, and it is satisfying to do them. Especially when you get the more complicated missions that make you do a lot of things in a row, and pulling them off like that is really satisfying. Not to mention the fact that it's got things like a level editor and tons of extra content, and the theme is really well produced. It's surprising how they went from developing this to No Man's Sky, and then they went from developing No Man's Sky to No Man's Sky, but people like it again for some reason. It's a little bizarre, but I mean, there you go. The second game just has more stuff to it, but the first game is still pretty enjoyable on its own. So it doesn't matter which one you pick up as long as you pick one of them up, because they're both great. Number 92.
Her destiny to meet. Tragic and fate. Beware the night. Child of Light.
So Child of Light is really interesting. I could go on about how its story is well told with the fancy rhymes, except for that one character who just does not want to match the rhymes, and I hate them for it. I could go on about how it looks great, how it sounds great, how it plays really well, and how it has a lot of stuff to do, but the thing about it is that Child of Light doesn't really be well told by the fact that it's got a bunch of things that work well. It's the fact that they all work well together. The sum of its parts make it feel like more of a sort of fairy tale than it does a proper game. And I actually really enjoy it for that. It's really good for just sitting back, relaxing, and feeling like you're being thrown into a really well-produced fairy tale. And that's great. Not to mention it's made on that UbiArt engine, so you know it looks absolutely fantastic on top of all of that. It is well recommended if you just want to sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself for a bit in a sort of fantastical world. Number 91. Yeah, La-Mulana is going to have to be here eventually, and it is a great little platformer, but I gotta tell ya, where this game really shines is the absolute depth of its secrets. The fact that there are so many things in this game to find, so many puzzles to solve, and just so many things to go and discover about it, makes it unique in pretty much the entirety of the gaming world and not just the Vita. The only downside to it is that unless you are really good at figuring out puzzles, you're going to want a guide for it, which kind of takes the specialty out of it. It would be great if there was like some kind of way to make it just that tiny bit easier for people who really don't want to rack their brains, but if you want a game that really does make you feel like a proper treasure hunter, and not something that feels like it's just leading you by the chain, like, say, the new Tomb Raider series games, this is the game for you. If you want to be able to dive in and be lost for hours trying to figure out just what the secrets of this temple are, go for it and do not use a guide. Just get lost. And that is something that is very rare these days, and it's very easy to appreciate because of it. Well, folks, that's the end of the first Top 100 video. I'm sure there'll be more in the future, but just for the purpose of making sure that I get this right the first time, instead of having like to remake a bunch of this stuff, I'm not going to be making another Top 100 video for at least a week, because I want to hear what people have to say about this one. I want to try and find ways that I can try and improve the format. It's not going to change very much, but if you have any suggestions for improvements or anything like that, that can go in the comments. I always read my comments even if I don't respond to them. With that said, I'm going to talk about why I make this list now instead of like waiting another few months for, say, Utawara Ramono Prelude to the Fallen to come out, to make sure that every game that has come out on Vita will have come out on Vita and this list won't be outdated again, because I find it very, very hard to believe that I have actually got any more games that could possibly go on this list. It's very unlikely that something could come out of nowhere and surprise me and get onto like the lower 80s or something, but at this point I don't believe it's going to happen. I've played pretty much every game there is to play on the Vita, and there's basically nothing left. There's like one or two maybe that might get into the low 80s, but at the moment it's not looking like that's going to happen, so yeah. What games do I have left to play? I've got a couple loaded up onto my second Vita, like an English patched version of Au Senki that might get on there. There is NG that's coming out in October, and there is Utawara Ramono Prelude to the Fallen that's coming, but, well, let's just not say anything more other than that, although I'm sure people can guess with how much I was gushing over those two games as I was playing through them. But yes, I really don't have that much left. There are a couple of things, like there's a bunch of sports games that I haven't gone around to playing yet. I tried playing Handball 14 recently, but that game was just a nightmare. I could not figure that game out to save my life. There's something like Doctor Who, The Eternity Clock, I think it was called. It was like a weird platformer based around the series, but I don't even like Doctor Who that much, so that's a thing. There are probably a couple of other minor, like, indie releases that I'm forgetting that I completely missed the first time around. There are a few that I've been outright skipping, like the bloody Paugi ones, the Kemco RPGs, and the Ratalaika ports that just look like basic platforming trash. Like, I took a look at two of the games that came out recently, and if I were to take the protagonist out of each image and then randomly swap them, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two, and that generally seems to be why I've been avoiding games by them recently. But yeah, basically, the reason why I'm making the list right now is that there's almost nothing that could convince me to change it or take a game off or put a game on at this point. So, yeah. With that said, please leave your criticism in the comments, and I will get to it before we make the next video of this series. And until then, I will see you all next time.